Hi everyone, this is Phil James, just doing my progressive podcast again. I want to kind of just use this one to again promote some of the other progressive podcasters out there that I think are just doing an absolutely brilliant job, and I could honestly never hope to keep up or catch up with those guys because ever since 2016 the amount of progressive podcasts that have popped up has been incredible, and the speed at which these channels have developed has been pretty impressive as well. I think the most impressive one for me though is a fellow British podcaster called Gordon Dimmock, and I was following him since pretty much when he first started his channel, because I remember it was well before he got a lot of the equipment he's got now. But since then he's gone a bit more mobile as well, which I've only ever seen from progressive podcasters like Chariton in the USA. Because the coverage that Gordon Dimmock did recently of what was happening in London to Julian Assange, it was just incredible because he was right at the front line, and all he does is tell the truth, and it was quite shocking really, because it was such a good way to expose what horrific crimes don't actually go on mainstream media, because there was absolutely nothing about it on the BBC, just the odd mention that he will be extradited by our bastard Home Office guy Sajid Javid, who signed the extradition order. I've got no civil respect for that guy. I'll call him a bastard, I'll call him anything under the sun really, because that's just about as much respect that he has for his own country. I mean, this is a man that lied to Parliament last year, just over a year ago, when he said that medical cannabis is now legal and available, and since then that's been turned out to be total bullshit, because the Home Office has continued to confiscate medical cannabis from epileptic children that need it. And what we've really seen is just lots of patients getting prescriptions if they can afford to go to a private clinic like on Harley Street in London. Now I find that pretty outrageous, because the premise or the reason why Sajid Javid initially went to Parliament to make that statement, it wasn't because he had to, because there was this epidemic of rich people with epilepsy that suddenly needed cannabis. It was because of ordinary people on average incomes that have children that need this medication. So all that's happened is the government has kicked the can further down the road, and they did it because they were trying to avoid a PR disaster, because they were basically playing chicken with these kids' lives. And but a year on, those kids are still struggling to get their medication from this government of prohibition. I just can't wait to get rid of the Tories, because I used to be one, I used to be on the right, and I kind of get this good satisfaction in rubbing it in the right's face that people like me are defecting, and I'm not the only one. I know loads of people that used to be on the right like me. We used to agree on a lot of things, but trickle down has been debunked. You can't really argue with that, because a lot of the time, the cat's out the bag, and the people on the right that still believe in the right are trying to put the cat back in the bag on all these ideas which are just fraudulent. I mean, another thing that really put me off right-wing politics was just the amount of hypocrisy from those communities, because even like someone like Sajid Javid, so he's clearly a right-winger. I mean, he's a self-confessed Ayn Rand fan, And now the hypocrisy there is that Ayn Rand, she promoted the century of the self, so be selfish, it's a good thing. She died heartbroken because the man she fell in love with, who was a great believer in her selfish philosophy, obviously couldn't commit to her, and that's what she wanted. So towards the end of her life, she was in poor health and she was dependent on state aid as a result of that. So everything that she said in relation to being selfish and how the state should never be involved, and tax is like theft and all that. I'm kind of seeing that hypocrisy everywhere on the right at the moment. For example, I saw a recent status coup video where they were interviewing MAGA guys, so Trump supporters that are ardent about Trump and refuse to open their minds beyond just voting for him. They won't listen to the other arguments and so on, but they will red scare outrageously. For example, I saw this one video where this guy in a MAGA hat was like shouting at the camera at Status Coup that oh yeah, Europe are dying because of we're really suffering because of free healthcare. It's such rubbish, and all this red scare that comes from them, I find it amazing. Like, they were interviewing at one guy who was defending the tax cut for the 1%, and he was saying, well, it got me a job because this corporation created a job from their tax cuts. I mean, for one thing, that it was all me and my. Hardly a philosophy for what's best for your nation. But let's look at that hypocrisy again that's coming from these MAGA guys. They say that capitalism is the best thing ever and socialism is like the worst thing ever, and they'll defend the 1% even though the 1% are actually screwing them. I mean, think about it. The 2008 bankers bailout, or whenever it was that I think Obama was and the neoliberals here were in charge of, that bailout was tax money. So that's socialism. In fact, because it was such a giant bailout, it's literally the biggest act of socialism since the effort to fight World War II. We see this with the hypocrisy, the fact that they don't acknowledge that the police are part of the state. So yeah, it just boggles the mind. Like, huge respect to Jordan Chariton and his team at Status for the patience that they've shown while they've been getting out there mobile like Gordon Dimmock and actually talking to the other side, because I think what they're doing is fantastic content, because it's showing the debate in real time, and for me it's really entertaining because the right have to kind of lie to themselves and they have to make themselves believe their own lies in order to feel like they're making any gains in a debate now. I mean, just take a look at those videos on Status Coup recently and where they've interviewed these MAGA people. It's kind of entertaining, but at the same time I find it kind of sad, because these people have basically been programmed by the ruling elite. And Chomsky, I think he had a term for these sort of voters. I think he called them precariats, like precarious, the way the ruling elite would see them as just precarious. We can just rely on their vote. They'll just believe anything. So yeah, it's a mix of feelings when you see people like that. I mean, someone I also want to mention is Dave from Save America Vote Tulsi Gabbard on YouTube. So that's his channel. I think he's on Twitter as well. But he's a great guy. And like me, he used to be very much on the right, I guess, or much more to the right than we are now. Yeah, and I guess for me it was kind of a fiscal thing as well, but like I say, that turned out to be rubbish. But he's got a great channel because he's been following the most progressive, he's identified the most progressive candidate, and this guy used to be a Trump guy, so that's amazing, right? Because it's not like he was watching TYT when he was supporting or voting for Trump. And back then, I guess TYT were doing a pretty good job of being the home of progressives, but obviously now they've kind of thrown that all away. And I kind of think that TYT are not going to be very relevant after 2020 if they keep supporting a neoliberal like Elizabeth Warren over Tulsi Gabbard. But then I suppose that 20 million in investment from a Clinton staffer is what really does the talking. So yeah, I wanted to just make this to really promote those really good podcasters out there that I have a lot of respect for. Oh, and also not to forget Kim Iverson. Please just look out for these names on YouTube, they're all up there. And the reason why I think it's important to promote these people is because they're all telling the truth. And it's so easy for them to do that because the mainstream are the exact opposite. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Please check out those channels. Alright, take care everyone. Peace.